Welcome back, everybody. So it might seem like I've jumped ahead, and in actual fact, I have. And the reason for that is when I got to about the third of the way down, I really realized that having all these wires placed on the board without necessarily having them soldered down was challenging because I have to work on both sides of the board at the same time. That means flipping the board numerous times. These things would fall out and I'd lose my place, and it got quite frustrating. So I actually jumped ahead and did the whole thing off camera. But don't worry, I'm going to use this opportunity to actually check what I've done with you and go over the steps involved. But I'm not necessarily going to do every single placement of every single component on the video. It just takes way too long, and it's a little bit boring, I have to say. I think some of you are getting useful information out of my videos, and I hope I can continue to give you value. From today's video onwards, I really want to get all of these components soldered down. So right now, we've done all of the board, and I want to just go over my last steps with you just to make sure I did not make any errors. There's a lot of tricky things on the last third of the turret board build. There's a lot of wires. There's a lot of floating wires, as they're called, these things here. And it's a little bit challenging, I have to say. So you have to take your time and be very careful. So let's jump into the steps that I've already completed here, and it'll give me a chance just to make sure that there were no mistakes. One thing I want to point out, guys, is when you start putting in these larger components, it gets tricky to place in the ones underneath, because in some cases they're like right underneath, or the numbers are hidden, and it's a little bit tricky. As you can see here, for example, you got a couple of components very close by. Here, I had to actually bend the leg of this resistor so that it wouldn't touch the other one. We don't want to have any short circuits or anything like that. So you want to be mindful of that. And of course, make sure that all of the polarized components are facing the right direction. We're going to be continuing from page 29, step number 82. And this step calls for a 3-inch jumper that is going to be put into eyelet 44. So that is this jumper right here in eyelet 44. Then we have to cut a 6-inch white jumper. We need to flip over the board and wrap one end through the back of eyelet 24. Now I'll show you where eyelet 24 is on the board from the front side, so it'll be easier for you to locate it on the back. And the thing is, you have to keep in mind that sometimes these locations are hidden. Eyelet 24 is actually right here underneath these two big components here, these orange drop components. Hard to see, but it's right there. Once we put the 6-inch white jumper through eyelet 24, we're going to have to pull it through hole number 4, which is right there. So I can carefully flip over the board, but every time I do this, I lose some of the leads that are just hanging here. So I'm going to do that extremely carefully, but I can't guarantee that nothing is going to fall off. All right, so eyelet 24 is here. And sometimes in certain steps, it might be a good idea to actually label the back side of the board when there's things that have to be applied to the back side, just so that you don't make any mistakes. I only thought about that later, so I only labeled a few places here, but I actually could have done more. All of these connections that are basically on the back side could have been labeled. So maybe that's something that you can do. So flipping things back and forth, things come loose, like this one right here just popped loose here. So every time it comes loose, you have to make sure you put it back in the right spot. It's a little bit of a pain, and this is why I don't like flipping things over. I would have preferred just to solder everything in place first, but the steps say that we have to put everything in place and then solder. So I'm following the steps, I'm being a good boy, but it is a little bit more of a challenge. Next, we have to cut a 4.5-inch white jumper, flip the board over again, and wrap it through the back of eyelet 5. So on the front of the board, eyelet 5 is located right here. And you can see part of the wire that is through the hole here. That's the one we have to wrap around. And then we're going to run that jumper through hole 43. So hole 43 is located right here. And there's a couple of wires that are going to have to go through hole 43. It's right there. So basically you're going from here to here on the back side. I'm not going to bother flipping over the board. I'm just going to show you where it needs to go. And you have to pull it through that hole. Next, we're going to cut a 6-inch white jumper. Again, we have to flip over the board and wrap this into the back of eyelet number 3. Eyelet number 3 is right here. You can see the actual wire end there. And once again, we're going to take that and we're going to run it through hole number 43, which is here. So you should have 2 wires coming out of hole number 43 right now. Next, we're going to get to some resistors. So step 83 says we have to add a 1K 2-watt resistor between eyelets 54 and 22. So 54 is right there, 22 is right there. So I'll just move that over a little bit. So there's the 1K 2-watt resistor. It's the only one of that color in the kit, and it's going to go between 54 and 22. Next, we're going to add a 15K 2-watt resistor between eyelets 22 and 1. So here, it's kind of like bingo, guys. That's the thing, you know, you're calling out these numbers, but you have to make sure that you do put them in the right place. So please be careful. It's easy to make a mistake sometimes. I actually did catch a mistake that I made earlier on and that I had to correct, but thankfully I caught it. I don't know how much damage it would have done if I didn't, but I'm glad that I caught it. So here, 22 is right over here. It's underneath the floating wires here. So I'm a little maybe not easy to see. I don't want to move the board too much, but 22 is right there. Number 1's right there. And there is the actual component. So this is 15K 2 watts, also the only one of this color in the kit. Similar to this one, just a different color. Step number 84, and here we're gonna have to add 6 white jumpers to the board. We're going to add a 1-inch white jumper on the back side of the board. I'm gonna avoid flipping the board over. I'm gonna show you on the front side of it. But you're gonna put that jumper between eyelet 2 and 22. So eyelet 2 is right here. You can see the little wire end right there. And 22 is a little bit hidden, but it's right here. So there's a little jumper going from here to here. You can also test that with your continuity function on your multimeter just to make sure it's good. Next, we're going to add a 6-inch white jumper to eyelet 54. 54 is right here on the edge of the board. Next, we're going to cut a 2-inch white jumper, flip the board over, and wrap one end through the back of eyelet 1. There's the jumper right there. You can see the little end right there. And it's going to be pulled through hole 71. So hole 71 is right up here. You can't see the number. It's underneath this component, but there's a large hole right here. So that is going to go from there to there. Next, we're going to cut a 1 3/4 inch white jumper. We're going to flip the board over and wrap it to the back of eyelet 22. Eyelet 22, once again, is right there, guys. You can see it right there. And then we're going to run it up through hole 72. And hole 72 is not that far away. It's right here, right beside. A little hard to see, unfortunately. The number is right under that component, but it's right there. Pull that tight, make sure it stays in place. Next, we're going to cut a 5-inch white jumper. And you notice that so far, all of these jumpers have been white. We haven't been using green. So make sure you take note of that. We're going to flip the board over and wrap it to the back of eyelet 22 once again. 22 seems to be a very popular location. So that's 22. We're going to pull its jumper through the hole 73 again, right there. and we're going to pull it tight. Next, we're going to cut a 2-inch wide jumper. We're going to flip the board over and wrap it to the back of eyelet 54, and we're going to run it through hole 72. Sorry, 74, not 72. Made a mistake there. This is hole 74, and eyelet 54 is located right beside it. So that little piece of wire that you see there is the continuation of this. All right, we're up to step 85. Now we're getting to what they call the flying jumpers. These are these wires here, which are a little bit different because they're not sitting on the board. A little tricky, but if you take your time, you can do it. Okay, next we're going to cut a 4-inch wide jumper, flip your board over and wrap one end through the back of eyelet 41. Eyelet 41 is located right there. And the other end of that wire is going to go through hole number 31, which is right here above it. And that wire is going to be pulled tight on the back side. But once it's through the hole here, you're going to have to run it back down this hole here, which is 51, and wrap that end through the back of eyelet 38. So it's a little tricky, guys, because you're doing a couple of things at the same time. But take your time and you should be able to do it without any issues. Now, hole number 38 is located right here. And again, it's a little bit hard to see, unfortunately. I'd like to give you a good view of that, but it's tricky, guys. So 38 is right there, this guy. All right, so I hope you got all of that. So it's going out of hole 31, going down into hole 51, sorry, and then coming out of hole number 38, which is right there. Next, we're cutting a 7-inch white jumper. We're going to flip the board over again and wrap it to the back of eyelet 63. So 63 is down here. So we have 61, 62, and 63. And you can probably see the wire right there. That's the wire that is on the back side. All right. And that is going to go through hole 51, same as what we did earlier through the back side. Just put it tight, make it go through 51, which is just here. And we're going to pull it tight. And that is going to be wrapped into this series of braids here. So for the right now, we just pull it through and leave it there. And then we'll wrap it with the other wires, and I'll tell you when we can do that. These are what we call the flying jumpers, okay? Step number 86, we're adding 2 more flying jumpers, which make up this braid here. So we need a 12-inch white jumper. You're going to flip over the board and wrap the jumper through the back of eyelet 38. 38 is here again. And then we're going to run the free end up through hole 51. So hole 51 is back here, same as the other one. And we're going to pull that tight as well. Leave that for now. And we need one more, a 6.5-inch white jumper. We're going to flip the board over, wrap one end through the back of eyelet 37. 37 is here underneath that little component right here. And I just knocked off one of the wires, but so 37 is there. This pesky little jumper keeps falling off all the time. I can't wait to solder this one down. It's just such a pain in my side and nothing but trouble. Anyways, I'm going to put that back in a second just so I don't lose my place. So we're going to, like I was saying here, you're going to put that through the back of eyelet 37 and you're going to run this jumper up through hole 50. Hole 50 is right here on the opposite side of this little orange drop cap right there. So once you have that step down, then the next step would be to twist all of the 3 wires that are coming out of the holes here. All of the jumpers need to be twisted together and you want to bend them toward the left side of the board. And then you want these jumpers to be up and away from the components. So you want to leave space underneath here. And you want to be careful not to disturb the wrap connections to the eyelets. Once you're wrapping them, it's kind of easy for them to come out of the hole location. So you want to make sure everything is still in the right place after they're wrapped together. This is what I mean by sometimes there's some little tricky things that, you know, you think you did it right, but then you realize, oh man, that little wire popped out of the hole. So you want to make sure you double check everything. So this is one of the most important parts of this whole thing. Once you finally get to the point where you have your flying jumpers wrapped, it's a little bit difficult to see and to identify which one is which because they're all wrapped together. To be able to make sure you put the other end in the right place, the right wire, what you should do is you should use your multimeter. In this case, I got this one here. You want to set it to the setting that will allow you to check for continuity, and like that. And then what you're going to want to do is you want to touch one multimeter probe to the end of the wire on this side to identify which of the wire needs to go in the holes on this side. Okay, so the process is a little tricky, but if you take your time, you can do it. And I'll double check everything that I did here. And so what you want to do is you want to go to eyelet 63, and that jumper needs to go through hole 46, and you want to wrap it to the back of eyelet 34. So to be able to do that, you need to be able to identify which one it is. So you want to start off by probing your eyelet number 63, and let's start off by doing that. And 63 is right here. You have a hard time seeing it on the screen, but it's here. All right, and then the other side of that wire needs to be wrapped to the back of eyelet 34. So if we did this correctly, my wires are kind of wrapped up here. Let me just unwrap them so I could do this correctly. So if we did this correctly and we probe the back, the other wire on here, 64, it should actually beep. And that's correct. So that's good. That's what you want to see. All right, next step, we're going to cut a 6-inch white jumper, flip the board over, and wrap one end through the back of eyelet 34, which is there. And it's going to come through hole number 46, which is right here underneath, right there. You're going to pull it tight and twist it with the flying jumper still remaining above. So that's just going to go straight up, and you're going to twist it into this braid right here. Next, you're going to cut a 6-inch white jumper, flip the board over, and wrap it through the back of eyelet 32, which is just underneath here, guys. It's a little tricky to get to, but it's underneath these fat orange drop components here. Trust me on this, it's right there. And you're going to run this jumper through hole 45 as well, and pull it tight and twist it with the flying jumper. So 45 is right here. It's going to come straight up, and you're going to twist it with the rest of the jumpers. Now, this is where the multimeter comes in handy again. We're going to do the same test we did earlier. So we're going to use the multimeter probe, and we're going to put it to eyelet 32. We're going to locate that eyelet 32, and we're going to just check to make sure we have the right wire in there. And guys, it's hard to see, but it's right here, right between these two components. And that is supposed to go up through eyelet number 1, which is here. Okay, so we got the right one. Next, we're going to find the flying jumper with continuity to eyelet 34. We're going to wrap the end of this jumper down into eyelet 2. All right, so again, start off by locating the hole number 34, which is here. And there's 2 little wires sticking out of there, so you got to make sure you're looking at the right one. I believe it's this one here. And you got to go to eyelet 2. And unfortunately, to be able to do that, I have to actually probe the other side of it here. Let me just try and see if I can do this without knocking everything out. So we still have a lot to do on this build. I advanced things by populating the rest of the components just to move things along, because otherwise the videos would just be too long and I'm sure you guys would be bored. So I actually stepped it up and did a little bit more populating of the components, but I'm going to walk you through all of the steps here, guys, so that you won't feel lost along the way. We're not going to skip any steps. I think if you're getting something of value out of watching these videos, I want to keep it up for those of you that appreciate this type of thing and this type of detail. So we're going to continue on page 25 of the manual, and that is step 59, which calls for a green back of the board jumper. Now, because I have so many components on the board, I'm going to avoid flipping things back and forth, just because when I do that, all of these wires that are not soldered in yet just fall out of place, and then I lose track of which one goes where, and it becomes a real pain. So I'm going to try to show you what to do on the front side, and you can follow along with the diagrams in the manual to know what to do on the back, but it's quite straightforward. All right. So next we need a green jumper. Make sure you have the green wire, the thicker gauge wire, and we're going to, it says to flip over the board and add a jumper between eyelet 16 and 21. And because I already did this, I'm going to actually use my multimeter here to point out the locations and to also check for continuity, just to make sure nothing fell out. Okay, that way I'm going to show you where the placement is, and I'm going to also be able to check my work at the same time. So we're going to be looking for eyelet 16 and 21. 21 is right over here, guys, and 16 is here. So if you look carefully, you can see the thick wire here. And if I put my multimeter on these two locations, you can see that the wire is forming a connection. That's going to the back of the board. Step number 60 says we need to add a 3.3 meg resistor and a 10 PF cap. And this is going to go onto eyelet 27 and 15. And now this cap is not polarized, so you don't have to be concerned about that. There are some that are, and I'll point out which ones those are, but for right now, this one is not. So let's locate eyelet 27 and 15. 27 is right over here, guys. Right here. And 15 is here. Okay, so this is the component that we're putting there between 27 and 15. Make sure you have them in the right location. There's a couple that'll go into the same hole locations there. Sometimes there's more than one component that will be put into the same location, so be mindful of that. Next, step 61 says we're adding a 470K resistor, and that is going between eyelets 27 and 14. So we know where 27 is, that's right there. And we just have to find 14, which is right over here. Okay, right beside 15 here. So that's 15, this is 14, and that's where that one goes. All right, next, step number 62, we're gonna require a back of the board jumper. All right, and that's going to be going, that's a 2 1/4 inch white jumper that we're going to cut, and we're going to put that between eyelets 15 and 40. All right, so it's in the back of the board here. I'm not going to flip it over just because everything's going to fall out, but just follow me on this one. 15 is right over here, and hole number 40 is right here. Okay, just where this big orange drop capacitor is here. Or component, it's right there. So it's going from the back of here and here. So if I actually touch the wire, you can hear that we have continuity there. And as a little tip, guys, what you can do is if you pre-read all of the notes in the manual, anything that says that you have to attach to the back of the board, you might want to go ahead and label the numbers on the back so that you get them in the right place. Don't make a mistake, because it's confusing when you're flipping the board back and forth. Sometimes you could think you're putting it in the right place, but you're actually in the wrong location. So to avoid that, you can actually just put some markers that will be visual identifiers, okay? All right, next, step number 63, we're adding a 0.0033 UF capacitor, and that's an orange drop capacitor. And that's going between eyelets 39 and 29. These orange drop capacitors are not polarized, so you don't have to worry about how you're orienting them. But it's a good idea to put them in such a way where you can actually read the information on them, should you have to replace one down the line. All right, so eyelet 39 is right over here, and by now you probably realize that they kind of follow sequentially. So if you're in the 30s, you know it's going to be around here. Sometimes they're a little bit further down, but eyelet 39 is right here. And it's a little hard to identify, granted, but it's here. This is 39 here. So this is the one we're talking about. So it's basically going from this hole to this hole right there. All right. That's the component that we're talking about. Next, 64, we're going to add 3 white jumpers. They're 6.5 inches. And we're going to have to mark one end with an orange marker. So if you have an orange marker, go ahead and mark that. I did that here. As you can see, that's the one. And we're going to be putting it right over here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap the unmarked end of the orange jumper through the back of eyelet 29. So 29 is right here, folks, right there. And if I go ahead and touch this wire here, we should get a little beep sound. Let's try that, making sure that we have the right thing and everything is the right place. So that is that one there. Next, we're going to wrap the second jumper through the back of eyelet 14. And eyelet 14 is right here. This wire right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to run that wire through hole 13 and pull them tight to keep them in place. So hole 13 is here. All right, so if I just double check the second wire, we'll do this. We'll just do the beep test. We have them in the right place. They're both going through that hole right there. Next, we're going to add a 1 1/4 inch white jumper to the back of the board between eyelet 39 and 64. So 39 is located right over here. A little tricky to see sometimes when we get into certain locations, unfortunately, but you know, it is what it is. It's not always easy. So 39 is here, right there. And you can see the wire there slightly. And that is going through eyelet 39 and 64. It's basically coming out of 64. So if we look at 64, which is here, that's 64 right there. Now, you have to be super careful, guys, because sometimes you think you're in the right location, but you're not, especially when you're numbering things here. So just double check everything, okay? That's 64. Actually, I think I just found a mistake. That's actually not 64, that's 63. So I should be careful myself here. Let me just double check everything here. Yeah, because you see, so I caught a mistake here, guys, which is great. So this is 62, this is 63, this is 64. So this wire, it should actually be here. So I'm going to take that out and put it in the right place. See, this is why it helps to double check everything that you do. Don't assume that it's right. So I went ahead and corrected the error that I'm glad I found. So now we know that the end of that wire is in the right place, and it's actually right here. What the hell, man? All right, so this wire should be going through this hole right here and coming out of this hole right there, and now is in the right location. All right, I'm glad I caught that mistake. Now, as you can see, some of the little wires popped out again, really a pain, but I'll put them back into the right locations as we go forward here. Next, we have to add two 100K resistors and one cap between eyelets 38 and 64. So, and then we have to add one other 100K resistor between eyelets 38 and 62. So 38 is the magic number in this particular case. So let's find that number. So 38 is right there. And that's going between 38 and 64. That's the one we have to put in that location. And then we're going to put one 38 to 62 right over here. Basically making a V-shaped pattern between the two sides. Next, we're going to add a 0.02 orange drop cap between eyelets 37 and 62. Once again, the capacitors, the orange drop caps are not polarized, so you don't have to worry about it. So this is the cap we're talking about. 37 is right there, and 62 is right here. I see that there's a wire that has come loose right here, so let's put that one back in before we lose that one. I can't wait to solder down all of these little wires because they're just falling out all over the place. I think the instructions should actually be a little bit different, and all of the wires that don't necessarily need to be attached. Never mind, scratch that. All right, we're at step number 66. We're going to add two white jumpers. We're a 3-inch white jumper to eyelet 64 And that one is pretty easy to do. And we're just going to make sure that we didn't lose that one. That's this one right here. 3 inches. Next, we're going to add a 4.5 inch jumper to eyelet 62, which is right here. And that one's already in. Then we're going to add a cap and resistor pairing. This is step number 67, which is a little bit more involved because as we did previously, we have some positive. So for step number 67, we're going to have to add a cap and resistor pairing as we did in the past. These are things that look like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap the leads of a 1.K resistor around the leads of a 25 UF Sprague electrolytic capacitor and solder them together. And these are going to be going through eyelets 12 and 61. So 12 is here, 61 is there. This is the pairing that we're talking about. The fluted edge is going to be going or pointing or closest to hole number 61, just to make sure that everything's oriented in the right location. And once again, fluted edge is positive, flat edge is negative. All right, step number 68, we're adding 2 resistors, a 2.7K resistor between eyelets 12 and 26. So that is right over here, 12, 26, that is the one we're talking about. And then we're going to add a 47 ohm resistor between eyelets 11 and 12. So that's this one right over here, 11 and 12. We're already at step 69, guys. Step 69 requires 3 more jumpers. We're adding a 2-inch white jumper to eyelet 61. And that's this little guy right over here. We're going to cut 1 7-inch white jumper. We're going to flip the border over and wrap one end of the jumper through the bottom of eyelet 26. 26 is there, right over here. And then we're going to run the other end of the jumper through the hole 48 and we're going to pull it tight to keep it in place. So hole number 48, if you guys lost track, is this one right over here. And just to make sure that we have the correct wire in place, I'm just going to check for continuity on this one. I'm pretty sure I have the right one, but it's always good to check it. And there we go. Next, we're going to cut a 5-inch white jumper. We're going to flip the board over and wrap one end of the jumper through the bottom of eyelet 27, and we're going to run the other end of the jumper through hole 49. So 47, if we look carefully on the board, is situated right over here. Sometimes they're a little bit hard to spot, guys, just because there's a lot of things happening, but 27 is right here. $27 is there, and 49 is right over here. I'll check once again for continuity, just for peace of mind. You never know. And we're good. Step number 70 says we have to add 2 more cap and resistor pairings, as we did earlier with this one here. And we're going to put those right over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a 3.3K resistor. We're going to attach it to a 1.5K resistor. And then we're going to... All right, so next, step number 70 for step number 70, we need 2 more cap and resistor pairings. We're going to wrap the leads of a 3.3K resistor and a 1.5K resistor around the leads of 2 25 UF Sprague electrolytic capacitors. So that's these boys right over here. And then we're going to basically put them between the eyelets right over here. I'm just going to move some things out of the way so you can see, maybe see some of the numbers. I'm not really sure. But basically the 3.3K resistor cap assembly is going between eyelets 11 and 59, which is here, 59, 11 and 59. And then the second one is going between eyelets 11 and 60. Now, because they look very similar, just make sure you don't mix them up. You can measure the resistance on these guys just to make sure. Again, these are polarized, so the fluted edge has to be facing the bottom of your board, and you're good to go. We're making good headroom, guys. We're jumping to the next page, which is page 26, step number 71. We're adding 3 more jumpers, white and green. So we're going to cut 2 4.5-inch jumpers, and we're adding those to eyelets 60 and 59. So 2 of them, 60 and 59. So we have one over here. This is 60. Then we have another one right over here, 59, which I believe we lost. This is a long one. It's a 4.5-inch, right? So there we have the one that needs to go in hole number 59, which is right over here. Then we're going to cut a 3-inch green jumper. We're going to flip the board over and add this jumper between eyelets 11 and 6. All right, so 6 is right here. And we have the little end of the jumper sticking out right over here. You can see that little wire. So it's going to be between 11 and 6. So 11 is here. So if I just check for continuity, we should have that right there, which is great. Step number 72, we're going to add 2 1 meg resistors between eyelets 9 and 11. And that is 9 is here, guys. 9 and 11. And we're going to add another 1 meg resistor between eyelets 25 and 59. And that one is a little tricky, and I'll explain why. So 25 is here, 59 is there. We have the combo scenario that we're doing here. You don't want these two to touch. They're very close. You can see how close they are here. So I bent this one a little bit so it doesn't accidentally touch that one and cause some kind of a short circuit. All right? Keep that in mind, guys. Keep your eyes open for those kind of things as well. Step number 73, we need to add 3 ceramic disc capacitors, and that's these little guys right over here, 1, 2, and 3. And so these are not polarized. You don't have to worry about the orientation of these, but you do have to choose the right ones. So they're slightly different in terms of size. So we're going to start with the 0.02 UF ceramic disc, and that is going to go between eyelets 58 and 36, which is the smallest of the bunch, which is right over here. 58 is there, and 36 is right there. Next, we're going to take 0.01 UF disc, and we're going to put that between 36 and 25. So 36 is right there. The 25 hole is right there. And finally, the last one is going to go between eyelets 25 and 9, which is right over here, 25 and 9. Once you have those in place, just make sure the legs are well bent so that they don't fall out, and we're good to go to the next step. Are you guys still with me? I hope you guys are. Don't give up. We're moving quite fast. That's just because I want to get through this whole thing so I can start soldering everything down so I don't lose things along the way. It's really frustrating when things move around and flop around like this. You have to kind of double check things along the way just to make sure you didn't lose anything. But we'll get there. Next, step 74, we're adding 2 white jumpers again. They're 8-inch white jumpers, and we're going to add it to eyelet number 9. So if we look at eyelet number 9, where the eyelet number 9 is on this side right over here. This one's tricky because we have to run it through a couple of things. So eyelet number 9 is going to run through hole number 10, which is right over here. And it's going to go across the back of the board and back up through hole 47. And that is going to be coming through on this side right here. So if I actually just check for continuity on this guy, just to put my mind at ease again, we should be looking at this guy right here and this guy right here. All right, so you got that here, here, back of the board, hole number 47. Pull it out and you're good. You're golden. Next, we're going to cut 1 7-inch white jumper. We're going to mark one end with a blue marker, and we're going to wrap the unmarked end into eyelet 25. Now, if you don't have a blue marker, you can use a shrink wrap or whatever you have handy. Just remember which one it is, all right? So you don't mix things up. So we're going to run that into eyelet number 25, which is here. This eyelet right there, guys, that's the one we're talking about. It's going to go through the back of the board, and it's going to go through hole number 10 across the back. And so this is going to go into there, and it's going to come out through hole number 47, just like we did with the last one. And there you can see that I put in my shrink wrap tubing here. So everything makes sense. So far, so good. Okay, next. We're getting there, man. It's taking its toll on me. I'm getting a little tired, but I think so far, so good. We're making it through this thing step by step, and hopefully we'll get through it together. All right, so next, step 75, we're adding a 2-inch white jumper to eyelet 58. That is this little boy right over here, this little wire right over here. That's eyelet 58 right there. Next, we're going to put a 7-inch white jumper. We're going to mark one end with a blue marker, flip the board over, and wrap the unmarked end through the back of eyelet 36. And then we're going to run the marked end up through hole 7. Okay, so this is similar to what we did earlier, just in a different location. So let's find the locations here. Eyelet number 36 is located right over here. That is this one right here. And we're going to pull it right through hole number 7. Hole number 7 is right here. So if we check that, let me just try to see if I can get that to beep without necessarily pulling back the wire too much. You gotta pull it back. There we go. Expose the wire a little bit so we can actually touch it. And there we go. All right. Next, we're going to flip the board over again. We're going to add a 1 1/4 inch jumper between eyelets 57 and 58 on the back of the board. I'm not going to flip it over because things are going to fall out again. I'm just going to show you where they go, and you guys could take my word for it. It's right over here underneath this little location here, 57, 58. You can see the wire sticking out there. And it's a little small jumper that just goes between these two little holes on the back side. Step number 76, we're adding a resistor, a cap, and a jumper. So we're taking a 1 meg resistor between eyelets 57 and 35. So 57 is right over here, 35 is right over here, and that's where we're putting that little guy right there. 57, 35. Pretty easy peasy, nothing to worry about there. I hope you guys can see it. There's the little things in the way here, but it's this guy right under here. All right. And next, we're going to take a 0.1 UK orange drop cap, and we're going to put that between eyelets 35 and 8. So the orange drop caps, by now we're pretty familiar with which ones they are. It's these guys right here. And we have one that goes into the same hole here, 35, and the other one goes into 8, which is on this side. And that's this big boy right over here. Next, we're going to cut a 6-inch white jumper, flip the board over, and wrap one end through the back of eyelet 8. And then we're going to run the jumper through hole 7 and pull it tight. So 8 is right over here. We can see well, I can see it. You probably are going to have a hard time, but it's right over here, guys. Right there. That little bit of wire is what we're talking about. And so that is going to be going through hole number 7. And that is right over here. So let's see. There we go. Good. Okay, now we have another orange drop capacitor and another resistor to work with. Step number 77, we're taking a 0.02 UF orange drop, and we're going to be putting the orange drop capacitor between eyelets 6 and 35. So 35 is here, 6 is there. This is the one we're talking about right over here. Easy peasy with these big guys. They're easy to spot. And then we're going to add a 220K resistor between eyelets 34 and 57. So 34 is there, 57 is right there. That is the component that we're talking about, and that goes right there. The beeping that you're hearing is just my multimeter reminding me to turn it off so the batteries don't die out on me. Nice feature to have. Step number 78 says we need to add 3 resistors, a 1 meg resistor between eyelets 33 and 56. So 33 is right over here, and 56 is right there. That is the component we're talking about. Again, the flying jumpers are going to get in the way. You might not be able to see it, but there it is. That's the one we're talking about. Next, we're going to add a 1K resistor between 33 and 55. So step number 78 says we have to add 3 resistors, a 1 meg resistor between eyelet 33 and 56. So 33 is right there and 56 is right here. Next, we're going to add a 1K resistor between eyelets 33 and 55. So 33 is the same hole, 55 is 1 over. It's going to go in the same position as one of these orange drops. And then finally, we have a 56K resistor between eyelets 33 and 6. So 33 is there. 6 is on this side, and that is the resistor that we're talking about. All right, step number 79. We're only 3 steps away from finishing all the steps on page 27. So stick with me, guys. Add 3 jumpers. We're going to add a 1.5 inch wide jumper to eyelet 56. So that is something that I have in place. This is 55 and this is 56, 1.5 inch. That seems right. Add a 2 inch wide jumper to eyelet 55. That's this one right over here, 1 over. And then we have a 6 inch green jumper to eyelet number 6. So the 6 inch green jumper is this guy right over here. Eyelet number 6 is the same location that the orange drop is going into, right over here. And you're good to go. Step number 80 says we have to put 2 resistors and 1 capacitor, a 220K resistor between eyelets 5 and 24. And then we're going to add another 220K resistor between eyelets 3 and 24. Pretty straightforward, guys. 5 and 24 is right over here. 5 and 24 is actually going right underneath this big boy. You can't see it, but it's there. Trust me on that. And next one is the 3 and the 24. So it's basically making a V-shape scenario right over here. We're going to put a 0.1 UF orange drop capacitor between eyelets 5 and 55. That is this big boy right here. 5 is there. 55 is right here. Easy peasy. Not polarized. And step number 81, we're going to add 1 resistor and 1 cap between step number 81, the last step on page 27. We're going to add a 56K resistor between eyelets 44 and 32. 44 is right there. 32 is right underneath, guys. Of course, you're not going to be able to see that one easily, but it's underneath right here. Right over there. That's where that one will end up going. And then we're going to add a 0.1 UF orange drop cap between eyelets 3 and 44. So that's this guy, 3 and 44. And that is the last step on page 27. We did it. Through the magic of video, we are now looking at a fully populated turret board, all soldered in. All the components are in now. And we are basically done with this step. I'm trying to give you a close-up view so you can see my handiwork, or maybe not so handiwork, depending on your skill level compared to mine. I did the best I could. Perhaps could have done better, maybe, but for the first time doing this, I'm kind of, I'm okay with it. I don't see any big issues here. And I'll give you a shot of the back of the board because some of you might want to see that as well. Let me tell you, it feels good to be able to flip over this board without having any of these jumpers falling out finally. So this is what the back of the board looks like. I went over and took a look at all of the, the little joints here and made sure that there was enough solder in every single one of the holes and we didn't have anything that was forgotten. I think I got everything right now. I pulled on the wires just to make sure that they wouldn't come out, that they're in there solidly. And that's basically what the back of the thing looks like. Of course, we can't forget this little board. This is also one of the boards we have to put in the chassis, front and back, a lot simpler than what we have here. But right now, the next steps are basically going to be all about putting these boards in the chassis and wiring up every single one of these wires here up to something. So we're not done yet, but I'm happy to report that things are moving ahead. And hopefully by the time we're done, we're going to have a really nice sounding Princeton Reverb to play once and for all, finally. Onwards and upwards. So I was quite happy about finishing the board and moving on to the next step until I looked at the container with all the components and realized, uh-oh, Houston, we have a problem. It looks like there's an extra component here, which I'm not quite sure where it goes. Because according to the instructions, not sure where this goes. According to the instructions, I went back and took a look at the diagram just to make sure that I hadn't forgotten anything. And I can clearly see where this component should go. This is a 600 volt component, and the number on it on this thing is 473J. And if I look at the instructions, it says this is where 473J 600 volt should go, between hole 18 and 69. And if we go to my board, I clearly have one here, and it's also, if we look at the indications, seems to be the same 600 volts, same number in the right location here. So I'm hoping that this is just an extra. It doesn't look like I forgot anything here. And if I count the orange drops, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm not counting this one. So there's 9 on the actual board. And if I go back to the drawing, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I think I'm okay. If any of you can shed some light on this mystery, please do. So we're back here working within the chassis, and the next steps in the installation manual that we have right here indicates that we need to install the board in the chassis. But before we install the board, we have to make sure that the turret board and the insulator board underneath it has wires that will reach the intended destination. And it asks us to place the board within the chassis and drop in a screw, one there and one between these guys right here. There's a hole located there. And to bolt this board to the chassis. Now the gotcha part is that right underneath here, right underneath the board, if you flip over the actual chassis, is one of the transformers. And it's almost impossible to get that bolt into it, into the right place. And I'll show you what I mean. There's the transformer. You see that little screw right there? Right there. That's where we have to put the bolt, the nut actually. So there's no way you're going to get that in there. So you're going to have to take out the transformer and then install the board, then put back the transformer. So that's kind of a gotcha that they should have addressed within the instructions. But I'm going to go ahead and take out the transformer, screw the board down, and then replace the transformer. Be back in a second. One other thing that is not that clear on the instructions is that the insulator board should be held in place with one of these bolts here that holds one of the transformers underneath the chassis. Otherwise, if you put the insulator board over the bolt, it doesn't lay flat the way it should. So it's best to take that bolt out, put it over the insulator board, and then place the populated board that we have here over that, and put the screws that will hold everything down through these holes, and then you should be good to go. There's going to be There's definitely going to be some adjustments that we need to do down the line, but if you remove this transformer, it makes it a whole lot easier to get that screw in. So the turret board is now in. I had to do a couple of little things to MacGyver it in there, because a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, I did have to remove these guys to be able to get the screw and bolt in the location. Right underneath here, there's the transformer, and it's almost impossible to get the nut on this bolt here without removing the transformer. So I removed the transformer, I put in the nut and the bolt on both sides, here and here. But because there's another nut here that's holding another transformer right under here, I felt the board was bending a little bit too much, because we have the board and then we have the insulator board underneath, and it was kind of bending too much. So what I did was I actually put in two spacers, two washers between the top board and the bottom board, so that there is a little gap there all the way through, and it's even. And I don't feel it's putting as much tension on the board this way. And the board is being held in place properly. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that these nuts and bolts that hold the transformer basically sandwich in the boards. It's very, very tight. There's no space here to get anything around the nut. So you kind of have to hold it with a needle nose pliers or something like that to make sure that it's nice and tight. It would have been nice to have a little bit more space, but it is what it is. We had to work with it. Now, finally, the other thing is that we also have to put in this board. And this board basically goes in this really tight location right next to the light, and the the components that come off of this slide right over the board. So the board and the insulator board have to go underneath all of that. Not always easy, and I'm going to have to probably fandangle that a little bit to get it to work. And also the screws that go there were missing. So I'm looking here, and all I have left is this. These screws are too small, and we have a whole bunch of bolts here. I'm not sure where those need to go. But it seems like I am out of lock washers, locking nuts here for this. So I'm going to just pick up a couple at my local hardware store, and I'm going to put those in. Other than that, you can see that there is a jungle of wire now, and all of these are going to have to be soldered in place. So there's still quite a bit of work to do, but I think, the most complicated part of the job is actually done. The rest should be quite straightforward, I hope, except for, little tight spots like this. Of course, when you're soldering things around here, it's going to be very tight. You got to be pretty careful. So it's going to be delicate work in some cases, but if you take your time, I think it's doable. So that's it for now, guys. I'm going to take a break. I'm tired, and we'll continue this project in a little bit of time. So that's it, guys. I'm tired. I think we're going to take a break now, and I'll come back to this project with fresh eyes in a little while. Sometimes you have to get to a certain point to realize that you made a mistake, and I did that right now after I tried to install the board here. And what I realized was that I had put the wrong screw and bolts in these locations to hold the transformer that is for the reverb driver, where in actual fact the reverb driver should have been located right under here with the smaller bolts. So I took it out, moved it over to this side. These are the wires that come out of the transformer that is going to the reverb driver. And I thought that it was odd that the bolt and nut was in the way of the board here because it was basically right in the middle. It was lifting the board up and making it kind of bend, and that's why I suggested putting some spacers. But if we take that bolt out of the way, we don't have that problem. So the spacers are not required. So my mistake, I thought we might have had an issue with missing bolts, but that's not the case. These are the right ones. They're smaller and they should be here, and it clears up the area here to put the board as well as the insulator board underneath. And now we have the extra screws that I thought we were missing to install this board right here. So chalk one up to experience. Let's now drop in the insulator board and put the screws there to be able to hold everything in place. Sometimes you have to get to a certain point to realize that you made a mistake, and I did that right now after I tried to install the board here. And what I realized was that I had put the wrong screw and bolts in these locations to hold the transformer that is for the reverb driver, where in actual fact the reverb driver should have been located right under here with the smaller bolts. So I took it out, moved it over to this side. These are the wires that come out of the transformer that is going to the reverb driver. And I thought that it was odd that the bolt and nut was in the way of the board here because it was basically right in the middle. It was lifting the board up and making it kind of bend, and that's why I suggested putting some spacers. But if we take that bolt out of the way, we don't have that problem. So the spacers are not required. So my mistake, I thought we might have had an issue with missing bolts, but that's not the case. These are the right ones. They're smaller and they should be here, and it clears up the area here to put the board as well as the insulator board underneath. And now we have the extra screws that I thought we were missing to install this board right here. So chalk one up to experience. Let's now drop in the insulator board and put the screws there to be able to hold everything in place. So after wrestling the board in, I got it in properly, and the final solution was actually a hybrid of both of what I said earlier. I actually kept the spacers between the board because I still felt the board was kind of not even, and when I was screwing down the board in these two locations, I felt it wasn't really holding the board down evenly and putting pressure on the actual the board on the top. So I left the spacers in between. I think that would be good at alleviating any excessive pressure that should not be there. I did not put spacers here, and as you can see, the board is a little bit like, you know, has a little curve to it because it's being held down by these screws. But this board is less critical as there's less happening on the back side. So as you can see, we have a lot of wires now, and a lot of these wires have to be put in place. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on that. And there's going to be quite a bit of soldering involved, but I'm excited because we're getting to the point now where things are starting to happen. And I'm glad I'm catching some of these mistakes along the way. Hopefully that could help you guys out. Of course, this board here is very tight. As you can see, I had to like slip it between what was already there. Not ideal, and we'll have to move the wires a little bit so they don't interfere with these two guys right there. I would have preferred for them to be a little further away, but it is what it is, and hopefully we won't have any issues with that. That's about it, guys. And so at this point, you have to make sure that everything that you put in place is tight and is in the right location, because next, step 81, we're going to be soldering the eyelet boards We're going to be soldering everything we put on the eyelet board. So if you made a mistake now, it's a lot harder to fix than if you go back and check your steps.